a group of education students from Saskatchewan, Canada, who will be traveling to El Salvador as part of the Saskatchewan Council for International Cooperation's Educators for Solidarity initiative.
The Educators for Solidarity is a group of young educators who are exploring the topic of global citizenship and how we can become global citizens and then bring those ideas into our future classrooms.
Before our travel, we have been participating in many pre-departure trainings and seminars.
We've just spent the entire weekend learning about global citizenship education, what we can do with it, what it looks like, and even in a lot of contexts how it feels to be educated as a global citizen. A lot of us started in a place where we didn't even know what global citizenship was.
I think it's important that teachers become interested in global citizenship because it allows them to be more critical and more conscious of the world around them and make broader connections to what they're teaching in the classroom and the students that they're working with. In classrooms these days, they're so diverse with ranges of backgrounds and needs that not using a global citizenship-based approach or lens is limiting the opportunities and potentials for your students.
Part of the Educators for Solidarity initiative includes creating a module that can be used in Saskatchewan educational context. As part of this module, we are going to be working all together to decide what we want this module to look like and how it's going to be formatted. We're hoping to create a resource that will be useful for Saskatchewan teachers so that they can teach global citizenship education in their classroom.
So the travel component of this initiative is paramount. The local community in El Salvador is dealing with issues that are very similar to the local communities in Canada and specifically Saskatchewan. And El Salvadorians have a lot to offer in terms of methods of attack or methods of solution to a lot of the problems that we share. So we have a lot of common issues and we want to seek solutions together. And although our problems are diverse in nature at the local level, they are still overarchingly the same problems. So if we can work together to solve them, that's a lot of global citizenship in action, and we get to experience it hands-on and really create a document that is true and not just theoretical. So our hope is to bring back lessons, not just for ourselves, but for other teachers. Lessons that might help us empower students to make the world a better place. Our plan is to do this through engaging in meaningful conversations with communities and initiatives on the ground in El Salvador and learn from their lived experiences. We're going to take global citizenship education. We're going to break it into smaller parts and examine each of those parts as we go on our journey to El Salvador.
So now that we are in El Salvador, it's our first day, and we are heading to the Equipo Maze. We're about to learn about the different history of El Salvador and how it came about and why things are the way they are today. So we'll be learning about different groups, political parties, and also the influences of other foreign places.
It's an organization of a group of popular teachers, and these popular teachers are working with the people, for the people.
Well, there was a popular educator that we talked to in Equipo Maíz, and he gave us the history of El Salvador and their indigenous people before it was even El Salvador.
What was interesting for me to think about was what the truth means and what knowing the truth means, especially in the context of this country. Understanding political history of this country makes me wonder, how much do I understand the political history of my own country?
It's this huge social justice oriented organization, and this library was filled with tons of amazing resources for educating the people of El Salvador. Things like solidarity, global citizenship, neoliberalism, working through structures of inequalities, breaking those inequalities, analyzing them, why do they exist. Kind of easy to read resources with comics, drawn images that really capture your attention and get the message across for understanding bigger topics of the world that we live in, especially related to social justice and inequalities and the economy, the environment, intersectionality, whatever you want to talk about. So that was really nice to see, and it was really inspiring actually. I think I definitely want to take that back with me to Canada because, to be honest, I don't think I've really seen that kind of thing in Regina or Saskatchewan or Canada.
We visited an Indigenous community here in El Salvador in Izalco. This Indigenous community finally became recognized by the El Salvadorian government in 2015. They've been fighting to be recognized by the government for many, many, many years, and the Indigenous community is both happy that they've been recognized by the government, but they also recognize that they have a lot of work to do to restore their rights.
We were in the Brett before we came to El Salvador to kind of touch on the Indigenous history.
And this place is where one of the first residential schools in Canada was opened, and the atrocities that were committed there is just absolutely horrible.
When listening to these stories of the people of El Salvador, it hurts because I know all too well. My grandma went to residential schools. Her mom went to residential schools. There's a lot of people in my family who went to residential schools, and so the intergenerational effects have definitely affected me, my mom, my whole family. These are my Indigenous brothers and sisters down here, so I think I have a responsibility to them.
Myself as a Métis person, I feel proud to be here and proud to have the opportunity to learn about the Indigenous people here and their culture and the many struggles that they've had to face and continue to face today. Just by being there, you could feel the similar and different struggles that we had in the past, and even some of the struggles that I think our people are facing today. Many of the Indigenous people here lost their culture due to reasons of not openly or publicly wanting to express that they're actually Indigenous. And that's mainly because of the fear for their lives. Sharing opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, cultural practices, and traditional dances, I feel like that connected us on a totally different level. And even by having that language barrier and not being able to speak to the people, I think our hearts spoke to each other and our past spoke to each other.
I can understand how important language is for communication, for expression, and for connecting to your culture. Hearing about how this Indigenous community in Izalco lost their language and how they're working really, really hard to preserve their language is really, really important for me, because I know that this is also a struggle that the Indigenous people in Canada are having as well. And it's really, really important that as educators, we somehow incorporate this learning of language in a meaningful way into our classroom, into our communities, and into our personal lives. Language is really, really important for culture, just as dance and song and food and history and relationships and connections and spirituality are also important as well.
And it's so important for youth to understand where their ancestors came from, who they are, who their own identity is, in order to be able to understand themselves, what's going on in the world, and maybe some things that they could change for the better.
In Izalco, we went to an organization called Mano Ojuste. Ojuste is a seed that Indigenous peoples of El Salvador would harvest and dry and use as a really nutritious, sustainable food.
Manu Ojuste was initially started with some funds from an international aid organization, but now they are completely self-sufficient. When we inquired if Manu Ojuste had plans to export the seeds to other countries like Canada, they informed us that no, they did not. They wanted to keep the Ojuste seeds here in El Salvador for the people to have access to its high nutrients and vitamins. Because I know that many, many countries export their highly nutritional food to other countries, I was so happy to hear that they want to keep Ojuste here in El Salvador. They aren't able to produce enough to support their own local demand for Ojuste, and they definitely aren't able to produce enough to export to other countries as well.
Mano Ohushde's philosophy is on keeping food secure in their own communities. They really work on securing a source like the Ohushde seed and working on distributing it locally, on creating ways to engage with the community in introducing it into schools. Mano Ohushde has pushed back against a globalized food market in securing this food for their community and for families.
We have seen a lot of food security issues here in El Salvador, but we've also been reflecting on a lot of the food security issues that we have in Saskatchewan as well. 12.6% of the Canadian population is living with food insecurity, which means that 1/8 of the Canadian population doesn't have access to enough healthy, quality, nutritious food or to have access to the quantities that they need to be healthy. This number is much higher in Indigenous communities. Indigenous communities are twice as likely to experience food insecurity as non-Indigenous communities in Canada, and obviously this number is much, much higher in the north. Ohushde is a traditional food of the Indigenous people, and I think it's really, really important that it's starting to be promoted in schools and in communities in El Salvador because it allows people to have that connection to the land and to relearn some of the Indigenous knowledge that has been oppressed by colonization.
We went to a organic coffee farm called Las Lajas, and it was a cooperative formed during the Civil War by the growers themselves. We talked a lot about the sustainable practice of growing this coffee and the measures needed to make farms organic and sustainable. There was just coffee trees placed all amongst the forest with the microorganisms and the large natural trees which shade the coffee. So just that interconnection and the sustainability of growing those coffee beans was really amazing to see. Reflecting on this and seeing the sustainable practices in El Salvador that the people are doing with small gardens in the communities, fish ponds that people can harvest. I'm really seeing the importance of local sustainable farming, planting your own garden, sharing the resources, that Indigenous way of being, of community is so important if we're going to survive as a global community.
We met with Sister Peggy from the Centro de Arte para la Paz, which is an initiative that was started in Suchitoto. The art center is foundational to the community of Suchitoto because it gives the youth something to do other than join gangs or get involved in activities that aren't benefiting their lives. It's empowering youth, it's giving them a place to go, and it's giving them opportunities to express themselves. As El Salvador has suffered some serious consequences of the Civil War, the opportunity for youth to be involved in the arts in ways that provide healing is very critical and crucial for their self-development and also for the development of their community as well. Today we're headed to the COCOC office. We're going to meet with members of COCOC and they'll be sharing about the work that they're doing in the community.
So they're really doing a lot with educating the youth here in Santa Marta about everything really. So starting with just knowing your body, sexual health, HIV/AIDS, LGBTQ issues, non-binary gender. So we were able to go into the school and actually kind of get a little bit of an idea what they do during these presentations to get kids engaged and get them learning.
So today we visited a family with which the parents were HIV positive. And this was a really unique opportunity to be able to go see some of the work that COCOC does with them and hear about their story of how the mother and father, how they became diagnosed, and the struggles that they've experienced with all the stigma that exists in the community. They talked about their families completely shutting them out when they found out their status, their health status. Luckily, for their medication, it's provided by United Nations, but there's so many other factors that you have to take into consideration with transportation and paying for doctor's visits, and luckily there are some subsidies from COCOC. As well, COCOC provides workshops and support groups for many people, many community members who are HIV positive, and this is a really important part of these people's lives because it's an outreach, it's a community where they can go and get support from other people who are experiencing the same thing. They can learn skills like making mirrors and soaps and shampoos, just being empowered and feeling strength even with this crippling disease that is so stigmatized in the community.
And I can only imagine that in Saskatchewan we also are causing a lot of people a lot of distress based on the stigma around HIV and AIDS as well. As a teacher, I think it's my responsibility to educate my students on issues that are affecting people, and HIV and AIDS is definitely an issue that is affecting the people of Saskatchewan, especially the Indigenous population.
Alright, so right now we are going to Rio Lempa, which is the spot, it's a river in between Santa Marta and the Honduras border, and it is the site of a massacre which happened March 17th and 18th, 1981. We went through a forest and kind of down this rocky, mountainous side of the river, and we came to this memorial place that was created as a memorial to represent the lives that were lost and the stories that happened at the Rio Lempa. So we stopped kind of at the end of the trail, and we had the great honor and privilege to hear survivor testimonies from Anna Maria, Veronica, and Dina. Dina in specific, who went into details about her experience of growing up in this war zone as a young girl. She told us many horrific details about how her family and her friends were affected by this, how they were displaced by troops, ran out of their homes, and just so many shocking, horrendous details. The Rio Lempa is such a significant place because this was really the end of the line. This was a place of desperation where all these people who were kicked out of their homes came to escape for safety, and the military groups were shooting down at people using like helicopters, all these horrendous things. It's unimaginable. Sitting with these women and listening to their stories, watching tears roll down their cheeks, there was a physical weight, a heaviness that we all felt, that I felt within me to receive this special gift of a story. So in education, we talk a lot about place-based learning. Place-based learning and relational learning provides more context for learners, and it really puts them right into their experience of developing this knowledge and understanding of the world around them. And I really feel a responsibility receiving this gift to go out and tell others. Dina asked us to tell others her testimony, and that's what we need to do.
We went to talk to some popular teachers at the school here in Santa Marta. That was amazing. We got another history lesson. These people here don't only have a sense of resiliency, but a sense of pride of knowing their history.
I mean, these people, looking back at their history, they're coming out of the Civil War. They're coming out of refugee camps where they've lived for 5-10 years in Honduras. Yet, through these refugee camps, people organized. This was where popular education comes in. People worked together. People focused on skills and knowledge, and they really had that sense of community and solidarity because they were working together to contribute anything that they could based on their experience in order to benefit the community as a whole. Popular education is about empowerment, and you don't need a classroom or a certified teacher to reproduce popular education. It's very much just rooted in issues that are taking place and affecting the community and beyond, and looking at what kind of skills people have and knowledge, and then expanding on those, and using different methods and techniques to teach people what they need to make change in their communities.
Even though they had no schooling in the beginning, they had no formal education to become a teacher and to be certified to teach, they came together and educated on social change and the injustices of communities in the country, teaching the students to be critical and conscious citizens. And really what they're doing is teaching children how to be global citizens, how to be globally aware of these issues and how they impact small communities, larger countries, and our whole entire world.
As future educators, we can learn a lot from this popular education movement and take it back to our own communities, our own schools, and kind of use a lot of the key ideas that their popular education is based around.
We visited Radio Victoria, which is an initiative that was started over 30 years ago. It's a community-based radio station. They are involved in social justice issues, and they have a lot of their volunteers and now employees who are risking their lives to speak the truth about the injustice that's happening here in El Salvador. And there has been 3 people that were assassinated because of their involvement in Radio Victoria. These 3 assassinations happened because people were speaking out about the gold mining that was happening in their community, and they weren't willing to have a Canadian gold company come in and ruin the earth, pollute the water, and cause serious health issues to the people. When the folks from Radio Victoria spoke out about these injustices, they began to receive death threats, and ultimately their passion and activism cost them their lives. Radio Victoria is really crucial to the community because they are speaking about issues that are directly impacting the community here. Radio Victoria has a really large reach. They're able to reach people that are living in poverty in this area because a lot of the people that live here have access to the radio. They may not have access to newspapers and televisions and things like that, but they definitely have access to the radio. And the radio has become a really important component of social change in this area. Yesterday we met with a group of young people who are producing a community bulletin and a community newsletter. The community bulletin was started by a group of youth when they were 14 years old. There wasn't a high school in Santa Marta at the time, and when they were in 6th grade, they realized that there was no option for them to receive schooling after that. And they petitioned around and they got together, and they were a very influential factor of Santa Marta gaining a high school. And since that time when they were 14 years old, they have started this community bulletin. At first it was going to be a 1-page photocopied sort of thing that was talking about different issues that was happening, but now it is a full-on newspaper that's produced every couple of months, and they report on community-based events that are happening, community issues that are going on, and other events that are happening in El Salvador that the state-sponsored newspapers aren't reporting on. They've seen a need in the community and they are responding to it with their skills in journalism.
This experience has completely revitalized my way of interacting with others. I now have this thirst for making change in my community because I know that that local change will affect change globally, and we can see that with El Salvador. The anti-mining laws in El Salvador, that definitely will have an impact on other global communities. So I think that is a really important point to make about global citizenship and global citizenship education, is that those local changes that you make will affect the global and will be able to create social change. And I think that's really what being a global citizen is about. It's about building those relationships, about working in solidarity together, about meeting an opposition, facing a struggle, and finding a way to work together through the struggle, or to come together to fight it. I think that was really prevalent on this trip. The resilience and the resistance of Salvadorans
We've been welcomed with open arms. We've been let into not just homes, but also people's lives and into this community in a way that is so special. People are allowing themselves to be vulnerable with us in a way that I don't know if I could be yet, and that's so strong.
Even though I'm one person, I'm part of a global community of billions of people on this planet. And the choices that I make really have an impact on a lot of people around the world. Even if I'm ignorant to what that impact is still happening. When we're looking at these global issues, they seem so vast and so large and so overwhelming, and it feels almost like we're powerless to do anything. But we really need to understand that global issues are really a collection of local issues. And in our time in El Salvador, we've been exposed to a variety of issues: food security, poverty, violence against women, lack of funding, genocide. And these issues really relate back to issues that we have back home in Saskatchewan as well. While I may not be in a position to specifically help the people here in Santa Marta in El Salvador, I am in a position where I can create change within my own community. I need to remember that I'm an educator, and I have the opportunity to teach my students, to help them change their viewpoints, to be more holistic, to be considerate of others, to teach how everything is interconnected, how everything relates back to Mother Earth, and how we really need to respect and honor the places and spaces that we're in, and to create a community that can work together to solve issues in a peaceful way, in a way that works for justice, and in a way that works to create social change to benefit not only our local communities, but our greater communities as well.
Santa Marta, tierra bañada con la sangre de tus hijos más valiosos, ejemplo de lucha y esperanza. Eres la llama que guías nuestros pasos. Sobre tus heridas construimos el futuro, al cual nos aferramos por honor a los caídos. Sobre tu rostro desfigurado por la traición de tus malos hijos, llevas la vergüenza que te agobia. Avanza, Santa Marta, por favor avanza, que puede más la razón que la traición. Avanza, Santa Marta, por favor avanza, que tu sangre es semilla de revolución, que tu sangre es semilla de revolución. Sobre tu rostro desfigurado por la traición de tus malos hijos, llevas la vergüenza que te agobia. Avanza, Santa Marta, por favor avanza, que puede más la razón que la traición. Avanza, Santa Marta, por favor avanza, que tu sangre es semilla de revolución, que tu sangre es semilla de revolución, que tu sangre es semilla de revolución. Okay.